evening and a warm welcome to all our viewers to an enriching knowledge series on facade and fenestration presented by TIMEX Bond ACP HCL, Architectural Ideas Personified. Allow me to introduce you to today's session and to the speakers of our today's session. TIMEX Bond ACP HCL, Architectural Ideas Personified, knowledge series on facade and fenestration, facade and beyond. Exploring smart facade design, the Sheraton Grand Bangalore Hotel at the Brigade Gateway. The master plan has been designed by HOK New York, ranked as world's leading architectural firms. The location of each facility within Brigade Gateway has been logically planned and designed. It is a remarkable blend of global experience, talents, and expertise of world-renowned HOK who have contributed to varied marvelous structures across the globe. Stretching across 40 acres in central Bangalore, Brigade Gateway is an integrated enclave and a self-contained urban neighborhood. It has planned zones for residential, retail, recreational, educational, and also commercial purposes. Our guest speaker for today's session is architect Kenneth Drucker, Design Principal, HOK New York, in conversation with Mr. Nitin, Bhatia, Managing Director, Facet Facade Consultancy. Architect Kenneth oversees design teams in HOK's New York and Philadelphia studios and guides the design of projects all over the world. He approaches difficult design challenges by concentrating on the essence of an idea and allowing it to drill down into the details of each project. He believes architecture must be sustainable while blending both art and science. We also have Mr. Nitin Bhatia, the founder and principal consultant of Facet Facade Consultancy. Since establishment in 2004, Facet has steadily grown to become a leading facade consulting firm in India and have executed some of the notable projects in the country. They have also executed projects in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Kuwait, Nigeria, and Bangladesh. Moving forward, today we will learn the technicalities of smart facade design and a detailed case study exploring the facade of Sheraton Grand Bangalore Hotel along with a Q&A via chat box. Do not forget to put your questions, which will be later on answered by our speakers. I hope we have an informative and an interactive discussion. However, before we start with the case study, we would like to play a short AV and thereafter Mr. Nitin Bhatia will be taking it ahead. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Nitin Bhatia, Principal Consultant of Facet Facade Consultancy, and today we have a very interesting conversation with Kenneth Drucker, Design Partner at HOK New York. Kenneth is going to talk about his project in India, which is especially the Sheraton at the Gateway in Bangalore. Hello Kenneth, welcome to this webinar. And let's hear from you a little about yourself and about your work in India and more about your project with Brigade at the Gateway.
Great, thank you for having me. I'm going to share my screen. So I've been traveling to India on and off for approximately 15 to 20 years. And it's been a fascinating experience for me in terms of understanding the culture. I love going to India. I love the smells, the fabric, the people, the textures of the cities, and creating architecture there. And what's really fascinating to me is how the technology really hasn't caught up to what I would say other world-class countries have. So it's been very frustrating as a designer because we have to actually design to what we think can be built in India. Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. You know, I'm delighted to participate in this discussion about facades in India. I've been traveling to India for almost 2 decades, and I actually am quite passionate about coming to the country. I love the people, I love the projects, I love the smells and the textiles, the sense of urbanity, and I find it a very friendly place to practice architecture. My relationship in India started with Jai Shankar with the Brigade Group, and since that time I've been working with Hines, with the Chatterjee Group, with Adani, some projects with JP before they had those issues in Noida, and lots of different building types. And we've been active in the transportation sector and active in residential and commercial and retail in India for over 30 years. So I'm gonna share a presentation that just briefly describes some of our projects in India, in a great country, and then focus primarily on the Brigade project.
Okay.
So does that sound good?
Yeah, perfect. Sounds great.
So HOK has been around since 1950, and we're basically a virtual company at this point. I lead the practice in the New York studio, and we basically follow our clients all over the world. And right now our work in India is done primarily out of our London, New York, and Hong Kong offices. And so we're a global practice. And what we do is we essentially have a network where we connect this practice together. And we fly all over the world doing our global projects, and we pride ourselves on being both local and global. We have people on the ground in India who act as liaisons with our offices and identifying projects. And we have lots of different project types that we work on, from architecture to consulting to interior design to landscape architecture, urban design, and visual communications. And we have 24 offices all over the world. And what we pride ourselves primarily on is sustainability. We've won more Committee on the Environment Awards in sustainable design than any other firm in the world. It's part of our DNA. We start our projects from day one thinking about sustainability and the performance of our buildings. We look to optimize that performance of our building. We're also leaders in building smart in BIM, and a lot of the research that we do have become textbooks in teaching Revit and building smart to the architectural community. As I mentioned, we've been in India for many years, starting primarily with our planning group for over 30 years, including Lavasa Hilltown and Lavasa Hilltown Phase 1. We've done planning where we've tried to blur landscape and architecture using biomimicry, trying to understand the impact of wind and sun and the natural topography to develop our master plans. We've also worked in Mahindra doing master planning. And here you can see Seawoods in Navi Mumbai. So I've done projects in Bangalore, Gurgaon, and I currently have a project under construction in Chennai. And out of our master planning projects, we also have opportunities to work on aviation projects. This is Airport City next to for GVK. And the first part of that project was doing the air traffic control tower at the airport in Mumbai. We were also part of the design build process and design Delhi's International Airport. And this was done in our London office, and we've done other airports throughout the city. One of the projects that I'm most proud of is the project we did for Oberoi. And what I like working with Oberoi is that they really care about the quality of construction. So this project started out as an office building and then was converted into a mixed-use building after the concrete shell was poured. This is an incredibly beautiful site, and I really am proud of the craftsmanship and the quality of this particular project. And you can see some of our master planning projects in Gurgaon and Delhi. This is a project that we did for Hines, a study You can see here we expressed our areas of refuge as major forms within the building. And then we do hospitality work. Noida Wave 1 in New Delhi, Noida Wave 2, some of the interiors for Noida. In Bangalore, studies for the Conrad in Bangalore. And then some projects that represent sort of quintessential sustainable design in that the buildings actually morph and they can be customized based on the solar orientation of the building. So this building actually has operable shades that sit on the concrete slabs, so you can adjust the building. And what's great about this project is that it's formally very interesting, and it will have the personality of its occupants as you slide shutters back and forth between the slabs, and then of course community spaces within that project. Similar project in Bangalore where we're looking at just articulating the unit types. So at Gurgaon, we've done lots of different studies for this site for the Chatterjee Group, looking at whether it's all office, whether it's office and commercial. The building in the foreground is actually a solar shaded facade on an office building. And we take a lot of pride in trying to understand the impact of designing in the heat and with all the dust one finds throughout India. And then this project in Chennai is under construction. It's topped out and the facade is going up. This is not far from downtown. So let me focus a little bit on Gateway. Gateway was actually my first project in India. It started out as a master plan. It's a 40-acre site. And Brigade was interested in creating mixed-use enclaves where people wouldn't have to spend so much time commuting from one use within the city to the next use within the city. And so Jai Shankar wanted to create a community that had housing, retail, commercial, hospitality, hotel, a club, a school, and its own central plant, basically. So it could be completely self-sufficient and could be entirely off the grid. So the focus today is going to be on the hotel, which is at the gateway and the entrance off of Raj Kumar Road. Let me just go over the master plan quickly. This was an industrial site, and we were asked to create what's now the Orion Mall, which has over 1 million footfalls per month prior to COVID. A hotel, which was a Sheraton very early on, and it was Brigade Group's first hospitality project. The World Trade Center itself was to be the tallest building in Bangalore. And then to the left of the tall building was to be a parking structure. And then on the very far left, you can see a little wedge, which is the central plant. And then the hospital is just south of that T building. We also needed to create play fields, a school, a club for that, for the community, and then about 3,000 housing units. So as design architects, we work in concept design, master planning, schematic design, and we always team up with the local architect. So for the tall building and for the housing, we teamed with Naresh Ventakaman, and for the hotel, we teamed with Abhay Zakaria, who used to work with me in the HOK New York office. And so we did this project together, and you'll see his firm's name in the title blocks later on in the presentation. This was an old industrial site. It was a brownfield site. We cleaned it up. We wanted water to be the feature, and we also wanted to restore and maintain as many of the heritage trees, the rain trees that we could, that one would find on the site. So early on, this is a concept drawing that shows the entrance off the main road. This is before Metro was installed. But we knew it was coming, so we knew the entrance was going to be over that roadway. And here you can see on the left the podium for the Sheraton, basically the glass wall. We wanted the Sheraton to be a cousin or a companion piece to the office building. And everything was to be connected by bridges. The hotel has its podium and pool. And then the hotel itself is a bar building, a double loaded corridor. And we wanted to create this nose of the building, this prow that you see on the left-hand side of the hotel, similar to the prow that we have on this curved, tall commercial office building. And we also wanted to shear the building in half so that the end view of the building as you're approaching the site would be slenderized, if you will. And then you can see the Orion Mall, some earlier concepts for the skylight, and then the lake that you see in the foreground. So that was the main entry piece as you come into Brigade. The Sheraton itself is basically a concrete structure with metal trim that has a absolute black base with some horizontal metal reveals to create some sparkle. And then the glass, I believe, ended up being a stick system, not a unitized system. And the north side of the building was a punched window wall system. A view from the lake shows the Rye Mall on the left and the view of the Sheraton. And the idea was to create a unitized system of chevrons of the sawtooth pattern for the main office building. And then I wanted to accentuate the corner of the Sheraton by creating horizontal louvers, creating sleeves through the exterior wall for structural support. The louvers became an issue, but about 1/3 of one end of the building ended up having horizontal shades, which ended up also being a lighting piece that you could see from the lake. As you move closer, you can see the bridges that connect everything together. The dark gray stone plinth, if you will. We wanted everything to be heavily landscaped. And you can see the notion of creating these louvers that are stacked on one side of the building. On the north side of the building, we actually wanted to create a change of scale. I didn't want to do an entirely glass building. So the same absolute black granite goes up the side of the building. And then we created these double height openings to deal with the scale of the openings. And we created some horizontal fins in a random pattern that created interest on that facade as well. This is sort of the main view as one was approaching this site. And what you see here are the Prows. And what's interesting is when we started this project, we weren't required to put in areas of refuge. And you'll see in the final project that every 4 or 5 floors, we did have to add areas of refuge at the end of the building and also on the north side of the Sheraton Hotel itself. These are some views from on the top of the podium showing the curtain wall for the Sheraton itself and the horizontal louvers. You can see the primary joints, the vertical joints occur at the partitions for the hotel rooms themselves. So this follows the hotel room module. And then a rendering on the lower right-hand side that shows the prow, which cantilevers over retail along the main entry road, and then the added areas of refuge on that facade on the north side. These were just some studies of the bridge connection, connecting the commercial to the hospitality to the retail. It was very important for there to be a seamless protected covering, separating pedestrians from the traffic at grade. And then as we develop the study models, you can begin to see the bridge, the main front door, the main entrance and the canopy, some of the storefront for the retail at the base. And then we wanted to create also a cantilevered screen wall around the mechanical penthouse around the top of the building. And here you can see the overall facade without the horizontal louvers, which we added after this model was complete. So Abbe Zachariah became the architect of record and took our concept drawings, and we worked closely with Abbe to develop the facades. And I would say that most of the facades were done through a design assist method, working with the fabricator. The group was Facade India, led by Ravi, and the fabricator was SP Fabricators Private Limited. And what's in black is actually showing the spandrel glass versus the vision glass. So even though it appears to be an all glass facade, it is all glass, but it does have spandrel glass on the non-vision areas. And I wanted to just show the plan to show how the facades actually follow the modularity of the footprint for a hospitality project for Sheraton. And then you can see the cantilevered prow on the far right side. On the north side, this ended up being where all of the mechanical ventilation occurs for garage exhaust and for kitchen exhaust. When you design a hotel, it's like designing a small city in that it's got its kitchens, it's got its loading, it's got its staff entries. This all happens on the north facade. And you can see the double height expression of floors, the ganging together of floors. And then we created this running bond pattern in the masonry on that particular facade. And then Abbe did this drawing, which I know is pretty hard to see, but it's an unfolded drawing showing all sides of the building. I wanted to just show other projects I was doing at the same time. This is a project in Korea, and this was a unitized wall system where we basically spent all the time developing one detail where these basket weave curved walls overlap one another. And what I found with the Korean curtain wall companies is that they were very, very precise, and we could pull off detailing like this. And just like with the Sheraton, we had a public side, which was the glass curtain wall side for these projects. And then we had, in this case, a GFRC side with a running bond to allow us to meet the energy codes and have smaller glazed openings on the north side. You can see the image on the right. It's similar to the partie of the Sheraton, where we basically have a solid punched opening on one side and then a glass facade on the other side. And then following the work on the Brigade Sheraton, this is a Sheraton that I did in Korea, the First Lead Gold building. And this was an exercise in creating basically a form with bay windows that point away from the sun with solar shading. So on the Brigade project, we had horizontal shading. Here, we learned our lesson. We basically clipped these shades, they're perf metal, vertically spaced in a running bond pattern, but it creates sort of an urban scale and texture and self-shading. And this reduced the energy load on this project in Korea 25%. Now that's some of the goals that I was trying to achieve on the Sheraton in Bangalore. So you can see the rendering on the right later on in the project with an expression of the room module, which are the vertical lines, and then some expression at the top of the building and the horizontal sunshades. And then we added lighting. Unfortunately, some of the lighting is off in this photograph on the left. And some existing photographs from Sheraton Grand's website. And then one final view of that particular project. I also just wanted to show how related from a placemaking perspective to the rest of Brigade Enclave, Brigade Gateway. Here you can see the faceted wall of the facade building. We wanted to create a scale of a tower, but also more intimate pedestrian scale at grade. And so we wanted to create these elements of solar shading for pedestrians at grade. And we wanted to preserve the rain trees around the perimeter. And on the main approach road, those rain trees were very important to us as one is approaching the Sheraton itself as well. Here you can see the sawtooth facade. And one of the things that I'm concerned with in working with India, and this does collect a lot of dust, is how often buildings are cleaned, the quality of the workmanship in a unitized system, the caulking a unitized system, and the level of the perfection in the pouring of the concrete in the edge of the slabs to guarantee that there's a nice, good relationship between the edge of the slabs and the facades themselves. We wanted to bring water throughout the project. We think it's important that we bring water to animate for acoustical reasons and just for visual comfort, and then a view of the Orion Mall entrance, where we do have four-way glazed systems with structural glazed blades. We have them on the Sheraton in India. It's called a spider system, and that occurs on the Orion Mall. It occurs on the tower, and it's also incorporated on the hotel. So this was my first project in India, and it's led to a long-term relationship with Brigade Group and with Jai Shankar, the chairman. And I continue the relationship with Abhay Zakaria in this neighborhood in Bangalore. And Abhay and I are doing some projects in Chennai as well. So that's...
Kenneth, thanks so much for that. Very interesting to see the sort of work you've been doing in India and some of what you've shown in Korea. So let me pose some questions to you. I put together some questions after looking at your presentation, and I thought I'd like to learn more about your thought process. I know you've spoken of some of the things, but if you don't mind, I'd like to ask a few questions, and if you could answer them, it would be great to learn more about the thought process. So the first question is that, what are typically design objectives that you consider in while designing the facade of a building, and especially with the Brigade Sheraton?
So, a lot of clients, especially a decade ago, wanted floor-to-ceiling glass on all their projects, which is very difficult to do in a climate like India. And actually, after I did this glass tower, for both the Sheraton and for the main commercial tower, I vowed to be more responsive to the environment, to look at more shading, to use less glass. So on the hotel itself, the building is half punched openings and solid and half glass. I would work to use more glass less glass moving forward. I think that, if you look at the Habitat project, if you look at some of the other successful projects in India, I think they're more responsive to the environment than this. And so that's what I've learned from this project, is you need deeper facades, you need shading, you need to first orient the building so that passively you're controlling the solar exposure based on the building orientation first. So for a long building, you always want to make sure that the short sides are facing east-west and the long sides are facing north-south, so that you can control the south facade more. Absolutely. So here it's actually reversed. The site planning is what dictated the tower placement. And so, it's actually flipped. The glass should have been on the north side, and the punched opening should have been on the south side. But because of the importance of the entry into the site, I wasn't able to do that. Sure.
So, would you say that if you were to get materials that were higher performing, glass, for instance, if you got very high performing glass which kept out heat, then of course the hesitation to use glass would reduce, I suppose, in the scale that we use it in an environment like here or another such environment somewhere else in the world. Performances are important, like you said, sustainability is important. So therefore, the higher the performance one would get, and nowadays you get glass which is extremely high performing. So would that, given today's scenario, would you still consider that you should, from a design perspective, not necessarily aesthetic perspective, but if you wanted to use glass, would you hesitate to do so?
I wouldn't hesitate to do so. The workmanship is an issue for me in India. For the most part, the tolerances are an issue. And in modern glass buildings, the glass isn't really the issue. It's the convection of heat through the metal. So rather than a 5-foot grid, I'd go with a 10-foot grid. Metrically, that's a different number, but, the less metal, the better. But I would tend to want to do glass buildings, but I would want to screen it with horizontal shading or perf metal shading so that one could actually shade the glass before the heat hits the glass. Obviously, in the 15 years since we've done this building, the performance of glass is much better than it was at that time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And another thing that I find, on a day-to-day basis, a problem with when it comes down to performance is glare and light transmission. And very often we see clients wanting to permit as much light as possible into a building without understanding glare. And I find in an environment like ours, we need, we've got an abundance of light that we should, restrict the amount of light that we allow in to make a habitable space inside. What are your views on that?
Well, when glare is an issue, obviously we want to create either sun shelves to bounce the light off. Here in the United States, we're adding frit for two reasons on the second surface. One is to prevent bird collisions. The other is to control the glare. So when a client does want glass, floor-to-ceiling glass or sill-to-ceiling glass, we are sometimes adding frit to the buildings. But it is, ironic that you do an all-glass building, you want the daylight to penetrate the space, but then it creates heat gain, and it's really a discomfort to most of the occupants, especially with the severe heat. For the Brigade World Trade Center Chennai project, we actually have a variable system of external sunshades. They're vertical shades that are made out of metal. They're colored terracotta to deal with the color of Chennai. But basically, they're both to eliminate the radiant heat that's hitting the building. So we've done studies by optimizing the design to eliminate the radiant heat. It also eliminates the glare because most of the glass is in shadow most of the time.
Yeah, that works well. All right, let me jump to the next question. From a design and engineering perspective, how different is facade or design of facade in India, or your consideration in design of facade in India versus that in the US, Southeast Asia, and the rest of the world? You know, given that you did say that you found difficulties in achieving tolerances, etc., in India at that earlier point in time. I don't know if you still face them on your project in Chennai, but it's great to learn.
I think it's less of an issue on a project 10 years later in Chennai. We have an excellent contractor. I think I mentioned the Oberoi project because of the quality of construction with Oberoi. I think it really depends on the quality of the contractor. But we rely a lot on visual mock-ups. We rely a lot on performance mock-ups and testing. And in the past, many clients haven't been willing to do that in India. There's a visual mock-up, but there isn't necessarily a performance mock-up. But we rely on those mock-ups in the United States and throughout Europe to test the facades and to make sure that we can improve all of the seals and some of the tolerances and just the workmanship.
Sure. You'd be happy to know that at least on projects that Facet, my company, handles, visual mock-ups and performance mock-ups are something that are mandatory, and we do that on every project with extremely tight tolerances, which would keep people like you and me happy when we go and inspect these facades. Let me jump to the next question. I think I already asked you about the ambient light. What about dust, noise, and smoke and fire? How do you respond to these issues in India versus other places, especially at the Sheraton?
Well, in terms of the fire stopping, we put adequate fire stopping between the edge of the slab and the facade itself, so that's not really an issue. Mm-hmm. In terms of dust, historically, clients haven't cleaned their buildings often enough in India. Mm-hmm. They build the building and then they don't maintain them, is my observation. Mm-hmm. In the United States, in New York, high rises are cleaned 4 times a year. And I think with the amount of pollution one has in India, you want to do a glass building, you want to do a metal building, you want to keep it clean, you want a real rig on the building, as opposed to a Bozeman chair for cleaning the building. So you want to design the cleaning system as part and integrate it into the facade system.
Sure. And it is being done nowadays on some of the bigger projects. Clients have become a lot more aware of that need, and at the end of the day, the customer is the all-demanding person, and the customer wants a nice clean building, so it's happening. So that's good news for you. What about jacketing of mullions and brackets? Is that something of a fire protection strategy as well that you've considered on projects here or elsewhere?
We have. Obviously you've seen video of high rises burning in the Middle East and in the UK. We think that, we don't typically want to use metal panel systems in our facades, especially sandwich systems in our facades. We tend to use aluminum plate when we specify metal. We do not specify sandwich panels in our facades.
Right. Okay. All right. Let me see what else I have for you. Tell me about the design and execution challenges that you faced on, a little more specific about those challenges, other than tolerances, of course. Were there any other issues that you faced while working on these projects over a period of time, not just with this particular one?
Well, the construction period takes a long time. I think it took 3.5 years to build these projects at Gateway, maybe 4. But the size of concrete and the impact of having to mask the concrete structure in India is always a challenge. The columns get bigger and bigger and bigger, and that impacts the spacing of the exterior wall to the face of the concrete columns. That was a shock to me. Here in New York, we're using much stronger concrete, which allows for a smaller structure The challenge in India is really the program is always evolving during the design process as well. I think that's common, but basically in India, the project adjusts. I mentioned the Westin Hotel. It adjusts based on the market demand. Our project we're doing for the Chatterjee Group in Gurgaon started as a mixed-use project, then it went to an all-office building project, and then it went back to a residential project and a mixed-use project. So that has an impact on the type of facades we're designing and recommending for each of those different uses.
Sure.
And the developers are following the market conditions. I used to have a philosophy that everything needed to be built in Germany or in Dubai or in China and then just assembled in India. I'm really happy to hear that India now has the ability to fabricate everything. Basically when I start a project in India, I think about a very simple form, not compound curves, because I think of the constructability issues. And I'm just happy to learn that things are changing so we can do more complicated designs that might be a little bit more ambitious.
Yeah, and fun to do. I must show you around when you're here next, and I must take you around to different facilities. I think that would be interesting. Right. What about materiality? Would you like to tell us about materiality, your selection of materials for use in this country from not necessarily a procurement point of view, but more from a adaptation to this scenario point of view?
Well, when I started going to India, I always thought I would be doing all the buildings in Indian sandstone. It's a beautiful natural material. And I do believe to do a sustainable project, you should be using locally sourced materials. And so, I'd like to introduce more locally sourced materials into the facades. I'd like to use more sandstone. I know that it's permeable, it collects dust, but it really does embody the spirit of India because it's a local material. I think that it's really important for everything to be contextual. I'm not a big fan of creating beacons or iconic buildings that don't nest neatly into the ground plane and create a public realm. That's why I wanted to show the ground plane and some of the areas around the Sheraton, around the lake. It's really important that we create spaces, not just objects. When I first was traveling, all the glass in India was blue, highly mirrored, reflective, single plate glass. A lot's turned the corner in the last 20 years. Here in New York, you can see Hudson Yards, which is all mirrored glass and high performance glass. But I don't think moving forward, you want to do all glass buildings, and especially in India and in such a tough climate to be working in.
Sure. So was the stone cladding, which you use granite, which I suppose was pretty local as well, because you get a lot of granite in these regions of India, Bangalore, Chennai. There's a lot of mines around. So how was the cladding experience? Was it a rain screen cladding? Was it a dry clad, wet clad?
It was a dry clad system, I believe. I believe that's what was finally installed. But once again, it was laid on site, and a lot of the stones are out of plane, so it becomes a workmanship issue. We added these stainless steel reglets so that horizontally, so that the building would sparkle, and some of them are out of plane. So I think quality control for me on that particular project is the biggest issue, and I think based on our conversation, life has improved. It definitely has improved on the Chennai project for the same client. The tolerances are much better. But when you're dealing with labor, you need to do mock-ups, you need to do quality control to ensure that the final product is what you've designed.
So my experience with quality, and I fully agree with you, you can work with the best guys, and if the commitment to quality is not as high as it should be, quality does slip. Even with the best of the guys, of course they do better than the guys who are not so good. But my observations have been that, if you want quality, you have to be committed. You have to spend time, effort, and money achieving quality in material or irrespective of who your contractor might be, of course, choose a good contractor because then it becomes easier. But if your contractor is not so good, life is not so easy if you're trying to manage quality. So, from a global perspective, how do you manage quality, and what good practices would you suggest should be imbibed in this nation?
I think in India and other international communities, when one hires a Western architect from New York or the UK, there's a lot of pressure to get us in and out very quickly, to get our concept designs and to get our schematic packages, and then to force us to disappear. And if you know your Goldman Sachs project with Tishman Speyer, the quality of the documents are really paramount, and continuity of the team and ensuring that that team has a presence from the beginning to the end will create the best project. There's a lot of fee pressure to have architects like HOK do the concept design and then get out and work with the local architect. I think if you want to ensure quality, you want great documents, and you want constant peer review, review of mock-ups, and then engagement for the life of the project to ensure the quality of the project from beginning to end.
Sure, absolutely. Because if you don't draw it, you won't build it. It's as simple as that. So yeah, I think that's extremely important to make sure that you get what you want, and all of us as designers, like to be proud of the work we do. We put in a lot of hard work. You put in a lot of hard work, dreaming of these projects, I'm sure, and then finally pulling it off. Kenneth, it was wonderful talking to you and learning of this project from you. And I wish you the best of luck in new work here and the rest of the world. And we hope that we will associate at some point in time and meet. And I'll show you around India. You can show me around New York when I visit you there next.
That sounds great. And after November 3rd, hopefully things will get better here in the United States, and we'll be able to travel to India again.
Sure, be great.
Thank you to our eminent speakers for the colossal knowledge shared this evening. A special thanks to our sponsor, TIMEX Bond. We thank our audience that have shown support and tuned in this evening. Until we meet again, stay safe.